All right, welcome to the Hoops Rehab Show Football Edition. I am solo tonight. Eric B. Mack is not here. He is out of the country having lots of fun. He will be back with us shortly. But for now, you got the game injury doc here on a Thursday night, here to talk about Thursday night football and some injuries heading into the weekend. So, as always, everybody, I am the game injury doc. You can follow me at all my handles on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, at Game Injury Doc. And then for the Hoops Rehab Show, please subscribe on YouTube at the Hoops Rehab Show. And after the show, the podcast will be up, and you can download that wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everybody, like always, let's get it cracking. Tonight, if you guys are streaming on YouTube or Twitter, please hop in the chat, ask questions, any injuries. It's going to be a little bit more of a heavy injury show. So if you guys have any questions on some injuries going into Sunday and Monday Night Football, let me know. Be in the chat on the YouTube or the Twitter, and I'll try to answer them throughout the show. So let's get started right away with the Thursday night football game. The Packers, who's obviously the Game Injury Doc's team, if you guys have been watching the show, versus the Commanders. And it was a big night to see essentially who is number 2 in the NFC. Because both these teams are pretty damn good so far, at least after week 1. But the Packers proved some things tonight. They prove that they have an elite defense, and Micah Parsons has made it even more special. If you guys are watching the game tonight, you could just tell by his effect, like during the game, is so profound, because if he's not getting a sack, he's still rushing the passer. He's creating havoc on the offensive line. There's a bunch of holding calls, some penalties, hands to the face, getting pressure on Jayden Daniels throughout the game. And those are like the percentage of plays that he plays, because he probably only played about 50% of the snaps on defense. So he's creating such havoc by just, right now he's technically playing part-time, which is keeping him fresh and hopefully keeping his back away from getting injured or anything like that, or getting any worse. So from that standpoint, that's awesome. I mean, it's great to be able to have a defense that can rush a passer, which makes it easier on your cornerbacks and safeties and linebackers. And you can tell tonight that they really made Jayden Daniels work and look like he wasn't like completely ready for the game or completely comfortable in this game. He was 24 of 42 for 200 yards. He ended up with 2 TDs, but he kind of got a late TD at the end, which didn't really mean too much. But where he makes his money is rushing. And he only had 7 carries for 17 yards, right? So he wasn't effective on the ground. Their run game was non-existent. And I think one thing the Packers have shown in the 2 weeks is that their run D, I mean, they held Jamar Gibbs to 60 yards or less. And then this week, pretty much the leading rusher was everybody at 17 yards. You had JCM at 17 yards, Austin Ekeler 17 yards, and Jayden Daniels at 17 yards. So if you can hold the Washington Commanders to 51 yards, you are probably going to win that game. And for the Packers, this game was so important because essentially they start off with 2 home games, and then they're essentially on the road until week 8. So it's going to be a long time before they kind of back home in Lambeau. So to be able to get 2 wins against quality teams in the Lions and the Commanders was huge confidence boost for the youngest team in the NFL. So let me know what you guys think. If you guys think that the Packers are a contender in the NFC, if they are are going to be below the Eagles there, like fighting for that number 2 seed. And if to be honest, if you think they're real, because even if you're starting off 2-0 and you look this good, doesn't always turn out to be this way. But the way they're coming out, the way they're looking, it looks like they can really compete in the NFC this year. And for the Commanders, I think they'll be back to getting back to what they do on the run game. I think tonight was a little bit of blimp, but at the same time, Thursday night football games are always difficult. And this is when people kind of get in trouble because it's just not their normal routine to be playing on a Thursday night. You ask any NFL player, they hate it. And unfortunately, this is when a lot of injuries happen. And tonight we had two major injuries. Unfortunately, towards the end of the game, Austin Ekeler was going out essentially for a pass, and you can see that he tried to push off his right foot and then immediately just went down to the ground in a non-contact kind of fashion. He immediately grabbed his Achilles, and then that's the point where you were kind of like, "This is not looking good." I got a hold of the video, and you can kind of see the little recoil into the calf when you slow it down, and then immediately you kind of knew this was not going to be a short-term injury. And reports are coming out that he indeed tore his Achilles. He will get an MRI to confirm tomorrow, but you can just tell from his body language how he was on the sideline. And just when he got the cart and he's kind of waving to the camera and you just knew that it was not good news, and that's something that unfortunately is going to keep him out for the whole year. And it's going to affect Washington, right? They traded Brian Robinson because they felt that they had a lot of backs that fit this system, like Eckler, JCM, Jeremy McNichols, and even Chris Rodriguez. So I think there's going to be people that are going to be stepping up, but to lose a veteran when you got a really young room of running backs is crucial for a team that's trying to compete in the NFC or trying to compete in the NFL at all. So unfortunately, Austin Eckler is going to be out for the year. We never want to see that. But I know when you ask NFL players what they think about Thursday night, they hate it. And I feel like there's always something that happens on these games. There's not an injury every week, but there's like these major type of injuries that will happen. And it's just really unfortunate to see. So, thoughts to Austin Eckler, I hope he's going to hit the rehab. And I know he's had a tough couple last 2 years really in this league, dealt with concussions last year. And he's getting older as a running back. So it's going to be a tough one to kind of get back from. But, he's a tough guy. So I would imagine he will be able to come back after a year. And then the other injury tonight was Jayden Reed in the first half. It was unfortunately caught the pass and scored a touchdown, but they called a holding penalty. So he caught a long bomb from Jordan Love. He landed on his right shoulder and immediately was in pain. And you can tell by the way he just dangled his arm, he just couldn't move it. The pain was too much, and he went immediately to the locker room. He came back out of the locker room with a sling, which is never good news. And the x-rays confirmed tonight that it was a clavicle fracture. So what they call a collarbone, but the clavicle was fractured. And typically this puts a player out about 6 to 8 weeks for it to heal. So the Packers are going to be down another receiver because they're already down Christian Watson. And the one position that the Packers have had depth at is the receiver position because they have a lot of young guys. Obviously they drafted the rookie Matthew Golden, which he had 0 receptions for 0 yards tonight. So that is kind of concerning from a fantasy perspective. And the first game, I believe he only had 2 catches. I'll have to look back on that. But he didn't really do much the first game as well. But you have veterans he's more of a veteran now on this receiver, but like Romeo Doubs will be there. You have Wicks, you have Heath, and you got some guys that possibly like Savion Williams that could be in the mix for for the pass catching for the Packers. So they at least have some depth there, and Christian Watkins is going to be out until he continues to rehab from his ACL tear. So you're looking at maybe mid-season to end of season for him, and then now looking at Jayden Reed being out roughly almost 2 months, which is unfortunate for the Packers, but it's part of the nature of football. Unfortunately, there's injuries, but hopefully he has a speedy recovery. But I don't see him coming back no sooner than 6 weeks. So as far as a fantasy impact here, and especially like when people have injuries like Austin Eckler, obviously it's unfortunate. But when you look at on the fantasy end, you got players like Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt, JCM, which will likely take over the lead back roles, which means more carries. So he might be a guy that, obviously he had a pretty rough game tonight, but he might be a guy that you can kind of go out and snag and see if you can trade for, because he's going to get a lot of opportunities now. But I do think they're going to give kind of share that backfield a little bit with McNichols, and probably now get Chris Rodriguez in the mix, because he did look pretty good for training camp and has not dressed because they had the 3 backs ahead of him. So I think there's going to be more people getting a role, but JCM might be able to have carve more of a role there out of those 3 guys. So you can see him probably get more of the rock, and as well as Jane Daniels is always going to rush the ball as well. So that's on that end. And I think for the Packers, Tucker Kraft, man, like since last year, that is Jordan Love's go-to guy. I think, to be honest, this year he's going to lead the Packers in receptions, and he'll probably come close in yards, to be honest, because I think it's going to take a while for Matthew Golden to kind of get the system, be comfortable, for Jordan Love to trust him. But we all know what Tucker Kraft has done the past 2 years, and he's starting off this year, he's still doing it, right? He had 100+ yards tonight and a TD. So I think if you're looking at for a fantasy perspective, Tucker Kraft is going to be the big guy going forward. You would hope that Matthew Golden will get his opportunity to shine and maybe get a little uptick in his receptions and yards. But I think like somebody like Romeo Doubs will be a consistent player if you need somebody off the waiver wire. If you need that wide receiver 3, 4, that's somebody to kind of look at there. And obviously, I think probably somebody who's going to have the biggest impact is Josh Jacobs, because he is so damn consistent. He again had 84 yards, scored another TD, which makes it, I think, 10 games in a row that he scored a touchdown. So he is pretty much as sure as a guarantee there is in fantasy, especially coming back from the running back side. So if you have him, keep him. And if you don't have him, trade for him. I think that guy is going to be a top 5 running back kind of moving forward into the season. And I also think Jordan Love, like he has come out this season and really proven that he's worked on his game all off season. His command of the offense is solid right now. He's throwing for more yards than he usually is. So I think he's going to have a solid season kind of moving forward. It's unfortunate that he's missing 2 of his receivers, but when you think about fantasy and you're getting towards the end of the season, going into the playoffs, and Packers are getting healthier, but those receivers coming back, that means he's going to be even more scary. And the fact that they've already won these 2 games and he's done well, I think bodes a lot of confidence of him as your QB1 kind of moving forward. But if you guys are in the live, go ahead and comment what's your questions on any fantasy advice, especially when it comes to injuries, in the YouTube or Twitter. And we'll continue to talk about the rest of the injuries kind of going into Sunday. So one of the first ones is Brock Purdy. And, he obviously left Sunday's game with a win, and nobody had any idea that he was injured. It was more on the likes of George Kittle and Juwan Jennings that people were talking about kind of going into it. Now, Monday comes forward and you hear that he has a left shoulder injury and a toe injury. And immediately, once I said toe, first thing that comes to mind for everybody is usually turf toe. And unfortunately, that's what Brock Purdy has. It took a couple of days for them to kind of finally say it, but he is suffering from a turf toe type of injury. And when you think of turf toe and what it is, essentially you have a joint in your big toe called a metatarsal phalangeal joint, MTP. And essentially when you get a turf toe by hyperextension. So if you get this, you take your foot down and somehow that big toe goes into this position, that is a hyperextension. And essentially what you'll do is sprain the ligaments of the joint. So those ligaments stretch too far. And just like any other sprain, there's grades of it. So there's a grade 1, which would be like minimal kind of stretching, minimal tearing. A grade 2 would be a partial tear, and a grade 3 would be a full-on, full tear. From the likes of it, because of this, they said that he's likely going to be out 2 to 5 weeks. You're looking at probably in that grade 2 range. But the concerning thing with turf toe is it usually takes a long time to kind of go away, and it's something that players deal with throughout the season when they have it, because they're trying to heal and then also play and be there for their team. So there's things that they can do is wear like padding or more of a hard type of surface for the shoe to allow him not to go into hyperextension. So there's like these little pads that'll kind of go under that will have some hardness under them, so allow them to kind of stay in position and not kind of go into hyperextension. So that's something that he'll probably be wearing when he comes back to lessen the pain. But honestly, it becomes more of a pain tolerance type of injury to deal with, and that with the season moving forward. And I think as far as San Francisco's case, and they have a lot of injuries, man. You got Kittle, you got Juwan Jennings, going into Sunday, everybody was worried about Christian McCaffrey. And that's because of the calf pull that he had in practice, but he looked okay. My main concern kind of moving forward with this is now the pressure goes on Christian McCaffrey. Now you're relying on Christian McCaffrey a little bit more. And I've told you guys, and I've talked about this on the show, is he's had a calf strain last year, turned into, well, probably what they did not tell us is he had bilateral tendonitis of both Achilles, which is super problematic. He ended up suffering a knee injury later on, but with the Achilles injuries, that's a degeneration of the tendon. So right now, it scars down and it heals, but he likely has some degeneration of that tendon. And so if you keep increasing his load, that's when you kind of worry like calf injury, Achilles injuries, things like that. So that's my main concern kind of for the Niners kind of moving forward, is with all these kind of injuries piling on, they're going to have to rely heavy on Christian McCaffrey. I do think that Mac Jones is a serviceable backup quarterback in this league, and he can come in and win some games and be productive. And what Kyle Shanahan has shown, no matter what, is he's always going to get the most out of his quarterback. Like, if you guys remember, Nick Mullins played so well under Kyle Shanahan, he earned himself contracts throughout this league, right? Like, he looked incredible for a while, right? Based on how Shanahan kind of game plans for his quarterback. So I think Mac Jones will be fine, and they'll be able to win some games without Brock Purdy. But ultimately, they're going to need Brock Purdy if they want to be a playoff team this year. So some other news came out with Chris Godwin. He returned to practice, which is awesome. He is coming off the dislocated ankle from last year. He's had to have surgeries. He has pins and screws in his ankle. The big news that came out, and this was last week, that he actually had a second surgery to tighten those screws because they became loose, which is kind of concerning. But the second surgery really fixed things, tied those screws together, and he has returned to practice. However, he is not going to be back probably until about October, looking about week 5 or week 6. But the reason why he returns to practice is, think of it like training camp. This is now his training camp. He can now practice with his team. That's why he's not on the IR. He's able to practice with the team, get the reps that he needs to get, and then eventually he can get back on the field in about a month or so. So great news for Tampa. Great news for some of their skilled players like Baker Mayfield. If he's getting back another elite receiver, that's going to help him. That's going to spread the game open for like a Bucky Irvin. So I am very high on the Buccaneers offense. I think they'll consistently be a top 5 offense. And I think people like Emeka Abuka, like, obviously we saw what happened in week 2, and in week 1. He looks amazing, right? 2 TDs, making amazing catches. I think that will continue even when Godwin comes back, but there'll be a little bit of tail off slightly just because you're going to have three pretty legit receivers to feed. But I think that's a good problem to have, right? Because now you can focus on, hitting Godwin over in the slot, right? Emeka can be on the outside with Mike Evans. You can put Godwin on the outside. You can put Emeka in the middle, right? So you can kind of interchange the two. And I think there's room for those guys all to kind of get fed. But I'm still pretty high on Emeka kind of moving forward. I wouldn't trade him if I know people are probably trying to get him. They're probably trying to trade for him. I think as far as rookie receiver this year, he will be pretty elite company, and he'll be going into next year as one of those top receivers that you'll want to get in your draft in 2026. So that's kind of the wrap with the Tampa Buccaneers as far as their injuries and players coming back. Now, the other big injury that kind of happened on Sunday, which I would say the player and the team really kind of minimized, was Brock Bowers. And when I originally saw the injury, it looked like the way he was hit from the outside of the knee, it looked like there's pressure on the inside of the knee. Typically, that causes like what we call an MCL sprain. And when you think of MCL sprain, like, it's the biggest ligament in the knee and it has a lot of blood supply. So it usually heals pretty well. They did not say this was that type of injury. They just said he got his knee hit. That's fine. But he also did not practice today. So I think there's two things being told. I think maybe they could be downplaying the injury just a tiny bit, because otherwise, if it was nothing, he would have played, he would have practiced today. Yes, they have a game on Monday. So Friday news will be huge if he practices or not. If he does not return to practice on Friday, that likely means he will be questionable to doubtful going into that Monday night game, because if he doesn't get a practice in at the end of the week, likely means he's not going to play. So I would look for those reports tomorrow if he at least gets in a limited session, or or he fully practices, which would be great. But if he gets a limited one in, that's more positive kind of going into Monday night. But if he does not practice tomorrow, that's concerning to me, because I feel like this, if it was nothing, he would be fine and he would be practicing. So I'd imagine he might be dealing with some swelling or some bruising or some pain, and that's why he's sitting out. But I think tomorrow will be a big impact on that, and we'll find out if he practices, and that will be his status for Monday, kind of going forward. All right, guys. So that will be it for tonight. I just want to kind of get everybody updated on injuries, kind of moving forward in the NFL. What happened tonight? Unfortunately, Austin Ekeler and Jayden Reed going down. Austin Ekeler is going to be out for pretty much the year because of the torn Achilles. And Jayden Reed is going to be out about 6 to 8 weeks with a broken collarbone, which is your clavicle. So unfortunate news coming out of Thursday night. And I know it's going to impact both teams moving forward. So we will be back on Sunday to kind of recap the NFL, and if anything kind of happens on that day, we'll go over the games and then any other news that goes on throughout the day. So from the Hoops Rehab team, we are out. I am out. Eric is on vacation, so he's having a great time. But we will see you guys soon. Take care. Peace.